All right, everybody. I am so excited. Today is going to be a super treat for all of you. I get to have my friend Amy Demas on the show with us today. And she is just a legend in our industry, talking about communication and how we can all do it better in our offices. So, Amy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you, Jill. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah. So the way I love to start out my Hey Docs, everybody knows this, that's been listening so far, is I always love for my guests to give us a little history. Just a quick intro on how, what was your progression? What took you from where you were to where you are today? How did you get focused on, not only consulting, but so specific, similar to me, very niche in communication? Because I think in marriages and life and everywhere, we could all use a little help on communication.
Well, thank you, Jill. So, it is a little bit of a winding trail of how I got to be where I am. So many of you know I am an engineer by background, and I did do that work. But I actually spent 12 years at home with my kids and homeschooled them. So there is this teacher at heart that I have. Uh, and life throws you some circumstances that I returned to the workforce and was at Bank of America and doing more engineering work. But then once I got introduced to this Dr. Don Demas, I got entered into the orthodontic space and even into his office. But my last twist of fate was after I had cancer, you reevaluate life. And at that point, I decided I need to go back to that teaching mode. I am a teacher at heart, figuring things out. There's that engineering, but a teacher at heart. And I had been doing Toastmasters, which we do speech evaluation.
Yes, yes.
So when I was trying to be a teacher at heart, let's be a teacher in almost speech evaluations, which is that communication component.
Sure.
And so when I started Communicate Excellence and developing a program on that, I just was simply speech evaluating all these phone calls until I could find any similarities to them, and then using those engineering skills to take that Pareto chart of what's the most common things, what's the low-hanging fruit that we can work on.
Yeah.
So that's in a nutshell.
That's so great. And, I know, having worked with so many offices over, the last 30 some years, I've been in the industry over 30, consulting in the last 17. And gosh, if there isn't one area that we always constantly need to be refocusing on, is communication in our practice. And it doesn't, and I know you would agree with me, it doesn't just fall on our front office teams or our treatment coordinators. I mean, it really is all of us. So we may put more emphasis on certain people within the practice. It really, communication can make or break us, from relationships to patient contact to, just everything.
It is. It's one of those soft skills.
Yes.
And when you look at it across research, it's such an important factor because it's what helps create that experience as opposed to just the transaction.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about the different ways that we may all communicate in an orthodontic practice. And I would love it, because I definitely defer to you as the expert in this area. If you could give us, our listeners, maybe we've got some team members on that are listening, maybe some good insight on best, we'll say, like, practices when it comes to the different types of communication modalities.
Well, we have more than the verbal.
Yes.
So
And I want to point that
focus.
out, because I think that's what we all think about, right?
Right.
It's just how we answer the phone. It's just how we greet somebody when they come in. But sorry, folks, we're 2023 and going. We got a lot of ways we communicate with patients. And this is a hot spot for me, because I think so many times we don't pay attention to that. So I can't wait for you to unwrap this for us.
So there are a couple different ways. So let's talk about modalities. So nowadays with our technology, yes, we do have phone, we have video, we have text, we have email, we still have print. And one of the things is we shouldn't throw away one simply because a new one is there.
Yes.
It simply means that, like a spice rack, now we have more spices to choose from of how do
Mhm.
we want to flavor this experience. And so we need to keep in mind when we talk about modalities, what's the message I need to get across? Is it,
Yes.
how is it being either interruptive to the respondent? Can they listen to this on their time?
Mhm.
Is it something that I need to be able to react to? Maybe I need to not have something in print.
Mhm.
Am I, how do I want to set that tone? How casual or business wise? So there are many things to consider. So, I've actually taken all those ways and thought about, well, how likely am I to get a response? How comprehensive is it? And you need to find what is the best modality for what you're trying to get across. So
Yeah.
don't throw out one simply because a new technology comes across. So
Yep.
that's from the modality perspective.
Mhm.
Then
So
thinking
good.
of the softer side of things, not only do we have the verbal, but we had the visual content on
Mhm.
there. And then we just have the way things feel as well in our actions on there.
Yes.
So we might have our words, but if somebody's eye rolling, oh, that says volumes
Yep.
on communication. Or if we say we are so elite or boutique, but yet we have scuff marks all over our walls, that doesn't show boutique,
Mhm.
the visual
Mhm.
component.
Mhm.
So communication has that visual action and verbal component. And then in the modalities, we have so many different ways, and we need to make sure that we choose the right one for
Yeah.
each.
I think that's so great to kind of pick that apart a little bit and to really think about that. And I would say it's also important, and tell me how you feel about this. When you think about all those different modalities and you think about all the different ways, I think that sometimes it can be a little unrealistic that we're just going to assume that our team members know how best to communicate with all those different modalities.
Right.
And yes, we may have generations working in our offices that have grown up on text and grown up on, emails and electronics, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily writing full sentences when they're communicating.
Right.
And so I think that it's important within our offices to actually even have examples of ways that we want to communicate, because even in our unwritten text there are tones that come through. Or like you said, you may visually see something and go, gosh, I'm reaching out to this really professional office and I just got a big run on sentence with no capitalization or no punctuation. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the place I want to go to.
Exactly, because you got to remember the moms who are coming in are not too far from my generation still.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet we have a lot of people answering the phone who didn't grow up with the kitchen corded
Mhm.
phone,
Mhm. Yep.
where you remember, you and I remember growing up, your mom would say, when that phone rings, you better answer it. Cromwell Residence, this is Amy. How may I help you? And
Yep.
so we were subtly taught that yes, answering the phone can be done in more than one way. There's a way with my
Mhm.
friends, and then
Mhm.
there's a way to be more professional. And we have a generation who is coming up now who didn't have that subtle teaching. And so
Yep.
we need to teach them, what does it mean to have a difference between formal and casual?
Yeah, I think that's so good. So that kind of leads me into my next question.
Mm,
I've heard you talk about the communication factor,
uh-huh.
and I think that if you can just kind of give the audience a little bit about how what this means and how this can impact our patients and their experience within the office or through communication. I think that's really going to be something that I know I want to hear a little bit more about.
Well, thank you. Well, it's interesting. This week I was reformatting some of my teaching. I always want to make sure that we're keeping up with the latest
Mhm.
research or
Yes.
the better understanding. So think about it in this way. Every time you have a time with a person, you have this transaction and you have this experience, or
Mhm.
and so there's two things going on. The transaction is when you make an exchange. I usually exchange money or time for something,
Hmm.
and that can be good or bad. And
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time being experts at that. It's how we
Yes.
process wise do things well. We overall tend to do that very well. If somebody feels like they got good value, they feel smart when they made a good transaction.
Hmm.
You've got this experience part, and communication really falls in the experience part. It's how you made them feel. Oh,
Yes. That's good.
and the way we communicate and the way we make them feel, that's what they go home talking about. A
Hmm.
lot of people don't really understand, especially orthodontically, what is quality. And so we give them the best we can, but we wrap it with a great experience. And that experience, a lot of it, like we were talking about before, has that visual, actual action and verbal component to it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we can wrap that solidly here and this solidly here. And we do that over and over and over again with each interaction. We're golden.
Yes.
But then
Yes.
when those break apart, it's like a dash line and it just kind of fades away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's so good. And I think, we can relate to this just with anything in our lives, right? I know we're talking about ortho offices in particular, but you think about when you go, like I was just thinking about going and getting my nails done the other day, and I tried out a new salon. And I mean, it was just top notch from the minute I walked in to the way I
Mhm,
was communicated to the experience I had with the nail tech. And I'm like, they aren't doing anything different,
mhm.
right? My end result was still a good result, and I'd pair that against other ones, but it was the experience that I had as a whole within the salon that made me go, you know what, I think I will go back there again because I left feeling good. And I feel like that's what we want our patients and our parents and people who interact with us and our teams. That's what I'm hoping that they're walking away from, instead of, how many times have we all walked into an office and, the person can barely lift their eyes up off of the computer, let
Mhm.
alone acknowledge that we're a living, breathing human standing in front of them.
Well, it's all the more important, Jill, because as technology allows us to have fewer visits in the office,
Yes.
we know that there's this metric out there. What is the cost per visit or the profit per
Mhm.
visit? And we know that number's going up and up and up. And if you think about it, when that patient walks in for a pokey wire and they have to slap down three $100 bills instead of getting it masked across monthly payments, whoa, I don't even pay $300 to go to a concert. You
Yeah.
better not go here and go, Amy, come on and show me your butt on the way out the door and go, yeah, that was all.
Hmm. Yep.
Experience is even more important as we get
Yes.
more efficient and they
Yes.
come into the office fewer and fewer times.
Yeah, that's such a great point, and I hope that our listeners really just sit on that for a minute, because that is it. I mean, I've been talking about it for this last year and a half about really being efficient with our time. So I think
Mhm,
it is also about really maximizing that patient experience when they are in your practices, or when you are communicating with them through digital monitoring, or however you may be doing that. that's
mhm.
that's that's great. So let's talk a little bit about habits.
Ah,
And what are some things that you coach practices on when they're trying to implement? And it's funny because I happen to be reading a book and talking about goals. And one of the big points, and I don't know why it was one of those mind blowing, like, it said, what are your habits that are in place that get you to your goal? And you could have good habits or bad habits. And I don't know why I never looked at that before. I always just thought, set a goal, figure out how to achieve your goal. But
mm.
it really is about the habits that are in place that then get us to our goal. So let's talk a little bit about that and how you coach teams on that.
Okay, so I am a habit guru, not only personally, but I love reading about habits.
Hmm.
And the Dr. Fogg, he talks about you've got to make things small because motivation is never going to carry you very far. You know,
Right.
he has a graph where he says, you know, motivation on Christmas Eve is really high to get a Christmas gift. It's not so high midway through the year.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the easier you can make it, the more likely that you're going to be able to do it even with low motivation, and that's still a win. So
Mhm.
the way that I coach is I'm using that principle all the time, which is as I evaluated, you know, tens of thousands of calls every year. Okay, what are the small things that are going to give us the biggest lift?
Yeah.
Because we've got implementation is always hard. You've got to realize everybody is still taking care of patients. And so I've got about this much capacity to try to affect change.
Yes.
So if I can do a small thing here and a small thing there, they get that person gets that win, like, oh, I did it.
Mhm.
But those small things have the biggest impact. And so now our patients respond better to us. And you get that symbiotic relationship going and that synergistic response. And it's like, oh, okay, now I'm going to try the next thing.
Yes.
And so, you know, it's habit upon habit. And I know, you know, we were thinking of talking about those small habits are really the leading indicators to that goal. You're alluding to that
Mhm.
because a lot of times for our team members, when we put a production and a collection goal out there, they're like, yeah, so what can
Yeah.
I do?
It kind of means nothing. It's not really tangible. But yeah, it can be a little obscure. Yep.
Exactly. The same kind of thing when we talk about experiences, be nicer, be kinder. It's too it's
Big. It's big.
yeah. So we've
Yeah.
got to bring it down to the small habits. It is when the caller calls and tell you why they're calling, I will say, I'm happy to help you
Hmm.
before we ask them their name. You
Yeah.
know, that that one step I know. When the phone rings, I do this. When the phone rings, I do this. When the phone rings, I do that. That's my leading indicator. If I do that every single time, it's going to elevate
Yes.
the experience, which will have the ripple effect of impacting that production and collection number.
Yes. And I love this because I feel like, and I have this discussion all the time. Well, only the treatment coordinators can impact this. Only the assistants that, put on the braces or do the
Mhm.
aligner scans or do whatever. And I think number one, it takes the whole office. But
Mhm.
I hope that we do have a communications coordinator or a doctor that's going to relay this because it is, you're exactly right. It does start with that, a lot of times, that first contact, and how we communicate with those patients can really make the difference on, do they make it in even for the first appointment?
It's the first
To
domino that's got to fall.
Yes, it sure is. And I think about it, even from, when we think about all the different ways that patients can contact us to get that first appointment, and whether it's through a text or whether it's through an email or whether it is through, kind of old school, picking up a phone and calling us.
Mhm.
um how that response out comes back to them could be the difference between they just go, maybe I'm just not going to be here anymore to respond, or
Absolutely. And when you consider in our industry, we're giving away these consultations. So they
yep.
go to multiple places, they call, they contact multiple
Yep.
places, and time is valuable. And if they've gone to one and they're like, well, I've got to compare, they go to another and they're like, "Hmm, pretty similar. I don't want to wait to go to the third one. What if you were the third one?
Yeah.
What I want to do is start from that very first contact, it be different, it be better, it to be, no, that was similar. That first contact was similar.
Yeah.
That one was better. I want to keep you in the game because I know if we can get them into your office, you're going to give them that better experience. They're going with you.
Yeah.
Um, but I
Yeah.
got to keep you in the game because if that first domino doesn't fall, nothing happens.
Yep. And I just have to say that I could not agree with you more. And I know that you and I both know there are some companies out there in our industries that it's all about quantity. Get the phone, get the information, get them off the phone, get the phone, get the phone, get them, get the information, get them off the phone. And and I'm not going to get into this too much, but I will just say this, that if doctors, team members, people who are listening today, if you are looking, and part of your core values, I believe, are to have, make an experience for your patient, get the call, get the information, get them off the phone, is not a place to start.
No, it is not. Now, it doesn't mean every call is going to be the same length.
Nope.
Trying to
Nope.
match your audience. It's feeding off
Yes.
your audience and matching them. Some of them you can tell they're in a hurry, and you can still have a conversation and start that relationship in a shortened, abbreviated one, and some want to be with you.
Yep.
But to treat everybody identically and to be bam, 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 this is a first date. And if the first date doesn't go well, you're not going to get a second date.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about leading indicators. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about what that is and what that means to you.
Sure. So we alluded to that. It is leading indicators are the things you do, and they're the things up front.
Mhm.
Whereas a lagging indicator is usually the result, the goal. And
Yes.
so there are steps. So, we can say, I want to weigh X. Well, okay. It means, okay, I will drink this many cups of water a day. It
Mhm.
means I will take this many steps. Well, in the office, it's the same type of way. It's when I go out to meet a patient, I will say this. When I walk with them, I will walk shoulder to shoulder. Those are the leading indicators that are check markable.
Mhm.
you
I
know,
love that.
you know when they're done. I did that. And if I do all my leading indicators, it will have an end result. It's kind of
Yes.
like some of the greatest coaches in basketball, Coach Wooden and those, they were less concerned about the win-loss column as opposed to what are we doing every
Mhm.
single day.
Mhm.
So think of leading indicators as what we're doing every single day, all those little acts, which
Yes.
some of them will get to our result that
Yeah.
we are actually doing.
Yeah, and I love the way you're breaking that down. I've never really thought of it that way. I've always said it's like you can tell when you've got a really well trained, we'll just use treatment coordinator, because going through the process in a treatment coordinating room is like a dance, right? And if you miss
Mhm.
one of the steps, when you're good and when you're converting, like, I've got to do this and I've got to do this and I've got to do this. And if I miss a step, um, you might stumble a little bit in your dance. And I think a lot of times you can come back and go, gosh, we rushed through that and I didn't get that conversion. Or I can, self-reflect and go, that didn't go so well. But I also realized that, we were busy that day, so we didn't take our pictures, or we didn't do our scan, or, the doctor wasn't able to get in at the, they waited too long in the consult room, or what, all of that. And I know same thing on the front of the house, clinical team, even doctor. But what I love is really thinking about in our office as choreographed steps
Yeah.
to doing something that are measurable, to then be able to go back and go, that went really well, and here's why, and here's the consistency, or that didn't go well, was there anything that we missed that showed us positive versus negative
Right.
in that.
And I want to make sure that we then don't feel like we're this lockstep, a robot.
Yes, agreed. Agreed.
There is the art and the science of it that we've
Yes.
got to
Yes.
watch
Thanks for
for.
bringing that up. That's for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Because while there's checklists, we always have to think, but what's the overarching goal? I
Mhm.
remember one time training a treatment coordinator, even in our own office, and she just wanted to do everything so perfectly. And that's what is making me think of bringing this. She had so many things memorized. And so when I was role playing with her in the office, I gave her a humdinger intentionally.
Sure.
And she
Yeah.
just kind of looked at me like,
I
"Go."
didn't plan for that.
Exactly. And I said, okay, to this individual, let me roll that back. Let's roll it back. Okay. In
So
this
good. Yes.
section of the exam, in this section, here's our ultimate goal. All
Yes.
these things that you're checking off or thinking of help you achieve that goal.
Mhm.
But I want you to just sit here and relax and be with me.
Yes.
And
Yes.
all of a sudden she went, Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that. Thanks for taking us back on that. Cause that is I 100% agree with you on that. And I think especially, and I see this over and over with our new team members in our offices so many times, I say they're kind of in the head down, one foot in front of the other phase.
Mhm.
And until they can get past that to that, oh, there's more than just following the steps
Mhm.
and knowing that you can throw a spin in every once in a while and you can, do a moonwalk or whatever your dance is, and it's still going to come out right. It's finding that balance and it's training. It just comes down to training and awareness
Mhm.
of what's going on and reading the people that are in front of you.
And what works for that individual.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's great. So, what are your thoughts on new ideas,
Hmm.
within an office? Because I'm sure there are lots of people like, oh, I've got this idea. Oh, I've got that idea.
Well, sometimes we like to go after the next shiny thing. Uh,
Yes.
but communication a lot of times is going back to basics.
Hmm.
A lot of things that we have are going back to common courtesy that tends to get missed when we get in a hurry. And so I find it less in the communication when it's the verbal. Now, the communication may get whiz bang with all the technology on there, but we still have to come back to the basics on there.
Yeah.
So if we only learn about these new things and never execute it, what good is it?
Yeah.
I would say if with the basics consistently applied, you will get a lot farther than all the bells and whistles of new things that are out
Yeah.
there.
I think again, such a good point. And, it makes me think about, and this happens a lot. A team goes out to a meeting and they get all these great ideas and
Yeah.
everybody, comes back and they're charged and they're excited. But what happens when they don't, then they don't get implemented? Or, it's like, oh, that was a great idea, but we didn't, blah, blah, blah. Or we tried it once and, we're never doing that again. So can you, maybe speak to that a little bit, maybe encourage teams if they are coming to their doctors or their office manager with all of these ideas. Maybe can you kind of help give us some steps on, do we try everything at once? Do
No,
we do we pick our top one or two, give it a
yes,
certain period of time? So let's talk a little bit about that.
yes. I like to do the one thing principle, and it goes back to that habit work
Hmm.
where one thing at a time, because if we try to do too much, we get hung up.
Yes.
How many times have our computers gone, and it gets hung up because the memory, the RAM, everything's used up and it just hangs until it can finally release
Yep.
itself.
Yep.
And we've already got a basis of a business to take care of. And so if we try to do too much, we're just going to be fritzing
Mm.
all over the place.
Yes.
One thing, master that next one thing. One thing, master that, then one thing. I
Hmm.
would rather you go slow and steady because one thing over time has a big impact. There's actually, I don't know if you've ever read the book 212 Degrees. And
I have
oh,
not.
it's a great little retreat book. It's got big words, lots of pictures. But the back of the book, 212 Degrees, says this: at 211 degrees, water is hot. At 212 degrees, water boils. And with boiling water, we get steam. Steam, we can power a locomotive. And
Yeah,
so
that's
that
cool.
1 degree over time is
Hmm.
going to have impact.
Yes.
It's why airplanes, it's the 1 in 60 rule. On a tarmac, you're not going to know if you're 1 degree off a destination. But over time, that 1 degree after traveling 60 miles would be 1 mile difference.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So one thing at a time, master one, move on. Don't try
Yeah.
to everything overhaul. Um,
That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful and such good advice for teams because I don't think anybody true. Well, there may be a few out there that are like, I don't want to try anything new because change is hard. And we
True.
know that. But, I think as a whole, most of our teams want to move forward and our doctors want to move forward. But I
Mhm.
think I love the idea of pick one thing, stick to it, master it, decide if it's working or not, then
Right?
move to the next. If it's working, keep going. If it's not,
Exactly.
you know,
Because an
tweak it.
engineering perspective, if you move too many variables, you never know what's working and what's not.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like turning the knobs of different dials. Okay, let's try that. Oh, let's try that. Let's try that. And,
Yes.
and it doesn't take long. Imagine if one a month, 12 things done well, implemented, executed, locked in is going to have a lot more impact than 24 things. And we stopped.
Yeah, so true. So true. That's great. That's great. So, as we kind of get to the end here and
Mhm.
wrap up this amazing session, let's talk a little bit about if you were to give three pieces of advice in regard to communication that a team could start on, a doctor could start on, and work on this year. What would those be?
So I'm going to refer back to the Power of Moments book by the Heath brothers. And they say people remember beginnings, ends, and high points. So
Mm.
make sure that your greetings, either on the phone or greetings in a visit, are good and locked in, and the way you lead them and walk out and end a call are all strong, and build in those high points. So that's going to be one thing. Make
That's
sure you
great.
have those things that are going to be memorable, natural memory points for
Hmm.
individuals.
Hmm.
Another one is make sure you have a service recovery protocol. That's for any of those
That's a good
close
one.
moments,
Mm.
because we talked about the transaction and the experience and we want it to be great, but none of us are perfect. Excellence doesn't mean perfect.
Mhm.
And so here's the thing is, a lot of times if there's an oops moment and we have a good recovery protocol, 25% of all the wow experience stories you hear of actually came out of an oops moment.
Mhm. Oh, that's good.
So that's my second one.
I
And my
love that.
third one is it is very wise to have an outside coach. An
Mhm.
outside coach gives you that we are for you, but we're not emotionally embedded in
Mhm.
there because
Yes.
we cannot see our own performance ourselves.
Mhm.
Why do you think sports does the reels that they watch and review the plays? Because when you're living it live, you don't have the same perspective, and a coach helps provide that for you. Coach
Yes.
is different than training on there, and so it helps us because we don't have that good perspective on our own performance.
Oh, those are three little gems there, Amy, for sure. That's
Thanks.
great. So if somebody wants to find out more about Communicate Excellence, the name of your company, maybe they're like, boy, Amy has just been hitting on some points. I think my team could really use a little help. Maybe I could use a little help. How would they get a hold of you?
So there are places on my website, communicateexcellence.com. You can even book a call with me there, or reach out to me with email, amy@communicateexcellence.com. And if you want to nose around, Communicate Excellence on YouTube has several quips and little training videos that you can hop in on and nose around and see what you want to
Yeah,
take.
that's wonderful. Well, Amy, I mean, dear friend of mine, I just love you. I love what you do for our industry. I will do a shout out and say, I think you're great for our community, and definitely docs and teams are going to get a lot out if they're needing help in this area. You are the expert in it. So
You.
thanks for giving us all these wonderful pearls today.
Thank you. I'm grateful.
So, as I like to always finish up
Mm.
my hey docs, I like to finish it up with a little speed round. Are you ready?
Oh, okay, go for it.
All right. Describe your style in one word,
Practical.
except for the purple hair,
Well, you know,
which I love. No, I would say
exactly.
spunky. I'd say
Well,
spunky.
okay, well, there, I'll take spunky.
What are you listening to or watching?
Ooh, so on Audible, I currently am listening
My
to
fave.
Call the Midwife, if you have.
Oh,
Oh,
mm,
yeah, that one's an excellent one. And I'm also reading some other various books on habits. So I'm always got a couple habit books.
Yeah, that's me too. I've always got at least 3 going at one
Mhm,
time.
mhm. And I'm watching Tough as Nails. Oh, I love that
Ooh.
program.
Oh, good, good. I haven't heard of that. I'll have to look for it. What do you do just for you?
My morning and evening routines.
Oh, good. That's a good one. And any hidden talents you want to share with us?
Doing Sudoku puzzles without writing the numbers down.
Oh my gosh, that's a great one. And then if you had a big, hairy, audacious goal for the year, what would that be?
Well, if it's for a year, it's that I want to be able to do multiple pull-ups instead of just one. And if you talk about this lifelong one, I talked to my child that we should apply for the Amazing Race.
Oh, well, I hope to see you on The Amazing Race. That would
That would
be
be
awesome.
fun.
Yes, that would. Yes, that would. Is that with your son?
That's with my middle child.
Yep. Yep. Oh,
Mhm.
that's great. That's wonderful. All righty. Well, Amy, thanks so much for being on Hey Docs. And I hope to have you again within this next year if you're good with that.
Sounds great. I'd love to. Always great being with you, Jill.
Yep. All right. Thank you. See
All
you.
righty. Bye bye.